Are you looking for a hard floor cleaner from Karcher, but ain't sure which appliance suits you best? You've come to the right place. We've tested the FC series for you, and you'll find out everything you need to know in this video. So just stay tuned. Let's start our comparison of Karcher's hard floor cleaners. We have divided the whole thing into 3 price points: the FC3 for the affordable, the FC5 for the medium, and the FC7 for the higher price segment. You can find the links to the products in the description below the video. We linked our individual reviews for you there as well. As we want to focus on the cleaning performance of the appliances in this video, we first need some information on how they are classified and how they work. We'll hear more about this from our colleague Remo, so now I'm sitting here at the table with the FC series hard floor cleaners and would like to answer 2 important questions. The first question is, what can a hard floor cleaner actually do? A hard floor cleaner is an electric mop designed to pick up light to medium dirt. And in direct comparison to a dry and wet vacuum cleaner, for example, these appliances all work without any suction power. This naturally makes them somewhat less powerful in direct comparison. The FC7 is an exception, though. Its cleaning performance is so good that it can even compete with 1 or 2 wet and dry vacuum cleaners. The second question is, how do these hard floor cleaners actually work? Well, apart from a few differences between the appliances, they all work in the same way, namely with a 2-tank system. Clean water is filled into the fresh water tank. Now you insert the tank, and you can start working with the appliance. Clean water is now fed down to the cleaning rollers, and the dirt is collected together with the water into the second tank, the dirty water tank. You can easily remove the tank and empty it over the toilet or sink when the tank is full or your job's done. Then put the tank back in, and you may continue working. Make sure that the fresh water tank still has enough water in it, otherwise fill it up again, and you can get back to mopping the floor. Now let's see what these appliances can do. We have put together several difficulty levels for you in our practical test so that you can better assess how far you can go with the appliances. We'll start off easy with level 1A, dry dirt. On the right we see cappuccino powder, and on the left we have a few sugar beads. And here is an overview of the results. As you can see, the FC7 achieved good scores. The cappuccino powder is picked up relatively easy. The same goes more or less for the sugar beads. Although these are spread around the room to some extent, you can still manage it quite well by going over them a few times. The smaller series FC3 and FC5 have a much harder time here. The sugar beads are practically shot away by the roller system, which ain't that nice, of course. So much for the first section. Now let's take a look at the next challenge. Level 1B, liquids. For our test, we spread a load of juice on the ground. The overview shows that the FC3 and FC7 in particular are well up to the task. We were a little surprised with the FC3 in particular, especially as its big brother, the FC5, did not perform quite as well. It simply brings too much water to the rollers and then spreads the juice and water mixture around the room. So much for the first level. Now let's combine dry and liquid dirt and move on to level 2, viscous dirt. Yogurt, ketchup, and applesauce should actually be a little more difficult to pick up. But as you can see, the hard floor cleaners perform similarly to the juice. Although the FC7 needs a few strokes, the bottom line is that it can also tackle such mess as well. Surprisingly, this also applies to the FC3, which also only needs to be swept a few times. The only negative outlier is the FC5 once again. Just like with the juice, it tends to mix the dirt with water and smears it over a large area. After several strokes, it works reasonably well, but it could have been a little better. What this test also shows is that Karcher's hard floor cleaners tend to leave a streak of dirt behind due to the gap between the rollers. Up to this point, this could still be dealt with a few corrective strokes, but we'll see how it goes from here. Things get really interesting in our next section. Level 3A, cornflakes with milk, liquids with solid particles. In other words, wet coarse dirt. This should actually be the end of the line for hard floor cleaners. And in fact, only Karcher's big brother, the FC7, can deliver a good performance here. The roller plucks the flakes apart a little, but you basically should be fine after a few strokes. Unfortunately, it's a different story with the smaller series. The flakes are picked apart and then distributed around the room by the appliances. A little bit is picked up. However, this is not a proper cleaning experience. Of course, we don't want to be unjust in regards to the FC3 and FC5. We wanted to see how far you can go with these appliances. But as Remo already said, these hard floor cleaners are not made for this kind of dirt. If the area of application is geared more towards light soiling, things look a lot different. Muddy footprints, no problem. Dried-in dirt. If you let the roller work itself into the dirt, also no problem. And even some of the things that accumulate under the table can be at least somewhat dealt with by these appliances. But they can't do much more than that. That's why we're now putting these appliances on hold and concentrate a little more on the FC7, which has even managed to keep up with most wet and dry vacuum cleaners up to this point. And as a reminder, you can find the links to the individual tests and to the products in the description below the video. And if the video was helpful to you, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Alright, let's continue with the FC7. We're still on the topic of wet and coarse dirt and are now taking it up a notch, with level 3B, canned corn. The liquid shouldn't be a problem, but what about the relatively large and firm pieces of corn? It tends to be a bit bumpy and rumbles somewhat, and you have to go over it quite often. But in the end, the pieces of corn were picked up properly. Considering that the FC7 has no suction power, the performance is quite decent. You can see how the dirt builds up at the tank opening, but in the end, the result is still impressive. Now we come to one of the biggest challenges and thus to our boss level, raw egg with its shell. The raw egg itself is generally not a problem. The real challenge is the shell, and indeed, this is where the problem lies. The goo itself is absorbed well, but don't be fooled by the first impression of the shell. Although it is flattened by the rollers and delivered to the back, it does not make it all the way into the tank due to its complexity. As a result, pieces of the shell keep falling back onto the floor and you end up scattering them all over the room. This is not particularly practical. Nevertheless, it has to be put into perspective a little, because in a direct comparison, even most wet and dry vacuum cleaners did not manage to push it all into the tank properly, despite their suction power. Even the top appliances from Tenneco dropped some pieces after picking them up. So from our point of view, we have tested the essentials. As many of you probably have a bunch of children at home who like to drag in dirt from outside, we'll take a short excursion on the subject of mud. Tough and sticky mud is not always easy, even for many wet and dry vacuum cleaners. However, the FC7 generally copes well with it. The only problem is the gap in the middle between the rollers. Even with the viscous dirt, you could see that this area is not cleaned, and therefore a streak of dirt always remains. In the case of mud, the whole situation is even worse. As the pile of mud is high enough to reach the bridge, dirt piles up here, so that a trail of mud is left in the middle with every stroke you make. Generally, it has to be said that the device can cope with the mud. However, we have to emphasize the problem with the bridge in the middle at this point because it can become annoying over time. The bottom line is that if we look at the overall assessment in terms of the cleaning performance, we must rank the FC7 above the smaller series. The test has shown that the FC7 is not just an electric mop, but can also do some of the work of a vacuum cleaner. Despite its designation as a hard floor cleaner and the fact that it does not vacuum, the appliance comes very close to being a wet and dry vacuum cleaner. However, this does not mean that the smaller Karcher series are useless. On the contrary, the FC3 in particular has delivered a solid performance for its price point. It is only important that it is not used as a wet and dry vacuum cleaner, but as an electric floor mop. If you only need the appliance for light soiling, this is absolutely fine. Unfortunately, the FC5 disappointed us somewhat. In our opinion, it should have been positioned between the FC3 and FC7 in terms of its performance. But that's not what we saw. Accordingly, we would rather recommend the other appliances in the FC series. So we have tested these devices for you. If there is a product that you are particularly interested in, then take a look at the video description below. You will find all the links there, including our individual reviews, of course. Otherwise, I'd be delighted if you'd stay tuned. Our Endcard will provide a few interesting video suggestions for you.